Imagine standing at the gates of heaven. However, instead of Jesus or Saint Peter or whoever your respective deity is, it's actually your PlayStation 5. Now I know that sounds ridiculous, right? Yet modern games track your moral choices with sophisticated algorithms that create detailed profiles of your ethical framework. From games like Fallout to Undertale, these games aren't just entertaining you, they're almost building a case on your soul. What might surprise you is how accurate they reflect our real-world moral compass. So today, we're going to be opening up that case file, and we're going to find out why you make the decisions that you do in games, but not in real life. And since you already know what we do here, we're also going to see how this looks like from a Christian perspective. Now, have you ever noticed how games almost watch your every move? Almost like they're not just entertaining you, they're putting you in situations where you have to make choices, and depending what you choose, the game will create almost a moral profile, determining the kind of person you really are. Now, remember when games were just jumping over barrels and collecting coins? Those days are long gone. Modern games have developed into sophisticated ethical laboratories where developers create these intricate systems designed specifically to measure your moral compass. And these aren't simple good or bad choices anymore. They are nuanced frameworks that track, categorize, and remember every significant decision that you make, painting almost a detailed portrait of your hidden values. Think about it, when you play a game like Mass Effect, for an example, the game systematically tracks whether you're going down the Paragon or the Renegade path. Every time you choose to spare or sacrifice a teammate, all those decisions are being meticulously recorded into a comprehensive moral profile. And this profile will follow you throughout the game, influencing almost everything in the world around you, from real-life events to even how characters in the game will treat you. However, what many players fail to realize is that these systems are actual consultations between game developers and experts in human behavior. Many game designers work with psychologists and ethicists to create moral choice systems that accurately reflect player value. And these aren't just any arbitrary mechanic. They're carefully crafted psychological tests that will reveal aspects of your character that you didn't even recognize. Now, moving on from the space ethics of Mass Effect and to the post-apocalyptic wasteland that is Fallout 3. In this game, early on, you're given the option to detonate a nuclear bomb in the center of Megaton, which at that point in the game is a struggling settlement. Now, you can earn caps and a luxury apartment by destroying the entire community, or you can disarm the bomb and protect the innocent. This game is recording a fundamental piece of your moral identity. What's funny is that these choices often reveal parts of ourselves that we truly don't recognize or even acknowledge. You might call yourself a compassionate person in real life, but when no one is watching and there's no real-world consequence, will you still make that same moral choice? It's almost like these games purposely created these consequence-free environments so that our true selves may emerge. What's even more interesting is when us, the player, truly identify with the in-game characters. What's more interesting is that when a player truly resonates or identifies with a character, they are most likely to engage in a more genuine moral reflection. Their choices would be more consequential because they'll see that character as an extension of themselves. Now, these moral choices have become so much more sophisticated as the time goes on. From the games that I just mentioned, to even games like Assassin's Creed having the notoriety system. However, when your choices are laid in front of you at the end of the game, when you see the sum total of your decisions and your consequences, when you're forced to confront the person you become when no one's watching, next time you face a difficult choice in gaming, just remember that these decisions aren't really meaningless. They might actually reveal parts of your character that need some reflecting on. That sinking feeling you get when you make a choice in a video game isn't just your imagination at work. It might be something much deeper. When even pixels on a screen make you feel genuine remorse, we've entered the territory that blurs the lines between virtual experiences and real-life emotional responses. Have you ever noticed the feeling when you betray a character or choose the selfish dialogue option? Deep down, you do truly get that remorse feeling. Now, neurosciences tells us that our brain actually processes the virtual betrayal identically to how it would process it in real life. This creates cognitive dissonance when our gaming choices don't align with our real-world values. Our brains will enter conflict mode, struggling to reconcile who we are versus the actions that we just took in the game. Now, I've spoken to gamers like my friends and even myself who regret many choices that I've made in the past games that I've played. I mean, I have many stories. I remember the first time I ever played Undertale. I never had no previous idea that there was the 3 different endings. However, on my first playthrough I did the neutral route. And once I gained knowledge that there was these 3 different endings, and when I realized that there was an ending where everyone could have lived and lived happily ever after, but instead I decided to slay down all of these characters, it truly sticks with you. Upon research for this video, I came across a story of a youth pastor who couldn't sleep after betraying a companion for better gear in Fallout 4. I remember he said something along the lines of, even though it was just pixels, something in my spirit felt convicted about loyalty. Now, our brain evolved from social interactions that were real, so it almost hasn't fully adjusted to these digital personalities. When a character you've journeyed for hours looks disappointed at you after you made a choice, your brain would process that moment the same way it would happen if it happened right in front of your eyes. Now, for my Christian gamers, this kind of creates a unique territory, if that makes sense. When we are presented with options that challenges our faith values, like deception, violence, or betrayal, the dissonance would become way more pronounced. Your brain will literally process these as genuine moral dilemmas. Scripture reminds us in Philippians 4:8, think about whatever is true, noble, and right. Principle that doesn't automatically switch off in the digital world. Now, remember that iconic line from the Telltale series The Walking Dead? Clementine will remember that. Those words carry such emotional weight precisely because they trigger the actual social and moral processing in your brain. The same neural circuits that fire when you disappoint a person in real life will activate in that moment, creating a genuine emotional response to a fictional character's reaction. Now, guilt isn't something we should try to suppress. In many ways, it's a spiritual sign worth paying attention to. Jesus taught us that sin begins in the heart. Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 to 28, suggesting that even our thoughts and our imagined actions matter spiritually. When something in a game genuinely makes you feel uncomfortable from a moral standpoint, that's an opportunity for reflection. When that guilt you feel after making a choice starts nagging at your conscience, it might be more revealing than you actually think. Games like I brought up before, Undertale, will test your soul when no one's watching. Now, many Christians, even myself, have felt uncomfortable in these moments, making a choice that will completely contradict your moral value. Now, psychologists call this phenomenon moral licensing, where being virtuous in one domain, such as church, gives us permission to act contrary to those same values in another context, like in this instance, gaming. It's almost like our brain is saying, I've stored up enough good person points that I can spend on making questionable digital decisions. Now, a game like Ghost of Tsushima brilliantly illustrates moral dilemmas by forcing players into a fundamental conflict between honor and effectiveness. As Jin Sakai, you face a question: does the end justify the means? Now, the samurai code demands honorable, face-to-face combat. However, these methods proved ineffective against the Mongol invasion, and the stealth tactics that could save your people are looked down upon from the samurai and almost violate their whole code. As you can see, there is no perfect solution to this, just a complicated choice that will reveal who you are when pressed up against the wall. Moving on to another game like Life is Strange. It takes this complexity way further with scenarios that carry significant emotional weight and consequences. The game's rewind methods will show exactly how it happened with a different decision. And yet, even with this power, you will face an impossible situation where every option will bring up a form of pain or loss. Now, these gaming worlds inhabit something that we don't have in real life: a delete button for our mistakes. The way that you can instantly reload a save file after making a choice you didn't like shows how much we crave that control of our consequences. But what if there's something deeper? In God of War, Kratos attempted to outrun his bloody history, but like seeds planted in fertile soil, his past sins eventually sprouted and found him, exactly as scripture says they will. And despite fleeing across realms and reinventing himself as a woodsman and a father, the consequences of his former life caught up to him. Unlike everyday life where cause and effect can be separated by years, games will compress this timeline into hours, minutes. When you betray a companion in The Walking Dead, you might face the fallout just 30 minutes after they refuse to save you. Think about it like this: in real life, we will rarely ever see the full impact of our choices. Like, what was that white lie you told last Tuesday? You might never know how much it undermines someone's trust. Or that moment of kindness to a stranger, you'll never know how it might have changed their life for the better. But in games, these cause and effect relationships happen right in front of us, and we get to see everything. Back to God of War, the game forces Kratos to confront the inescapable nature of his past. His history of violence almost pursues him like a shadow that will grow much larger at sunset rather than disappearing. And this mirrors Scripture's foundational principle: what we sow, we will eventually reap. What makes these digital experiences so spiritually significant is how they train us to think differently about time and consequence. Your seemingly innocent dialogue, choice in the first hour might determine who will live and die in the final chapter. Now, while we have been focusing on the choices as a player, have you ever stopped to consider who's designing these moral labyrinths? The mind behind games like BioShock or Elden Ring or Dark Souls aren't just programmers. They're philosophical explorers using code instead of scrolls to probe humanity's oldest question. Game creators like Ken Levine and Hidetaka Miyazaki almost function as digital sages, using pixels and codes to create such parables that will teach you a lesson that will stick with you. Like Miyazaki's Dark Souls presents a brutal world where suffering has meaning and persistence leads to growth. These themes that echo these biblical teachings about trials producing character both reach people who might never engage with traditional religious teaching, like 20-somethings who might roll their eyes at a sermon, but willingly absorb similar wisdom through a controller. Now let's go to David Cage's Detroit Become Human. This game truly asks what truly makes us human by putting players in the shoes of androids fighting for recognition. And as you navigate their choices, you will consider deeper questions about consciousness and moral responsibility. Even Assassin's Creed, with its nothing is true, everything is permitted, creates a space for players to reflect on why they believe what they believe in, potentially strengthening faith rather than weakening it. Now, what if these unexpected messages are reaching people that institutions like churches can't? What if God is using these game designers, whether they're believers or not, to spark curiosity in ways that the ministry could never? Now, let's go back to the question, why do we behave differently in these games? Now, these game creators may be modern day philosophers, but are players becoming the masters of moral gymnastics? That mental flip you get when transitioning from real world values to in-game behavior is like watching a split screen TV. One side showing your Sunday morning self and the other side showing that Sunday's afternoon virtual chaos. Like, how many of us have sat in church reflecting on God's command not to murder just to go mow down pedestrians in GTA 5? For Christians, this directly connects to James 1:8, which warns us about being double-minded and unstable in all your ways. This scripture isn't obviously addressing just video games, but the principle does apply to this moral phenomenon. Now, the spiritual connection that we've just been going through doesn't have to be the end of the story. What if I told you these same decisions and same games that expose us could actually strengthen us spiritually instead? Now, this approach transforms gaming from a potential faith disconnect into a meaningful spiritual practice. When we leave our beliefs behind during gameplay, we will create that cognitive dissonance we talked about earlier. This is where the concept of mindful gaming comes in. It involves taking intentional moments during gameplay to reflect on your decisions and choices. Now, if we go back to Life is Strange, where the rewind mechanic will let you explore different outcomes, we can literally see how that decision would have played out. So, what would happen if we approach every gaming session this way? Instead of leaving our faith behind, we intentionally carry it with us. Not in a way where it'll take the fun out of gaming, but in a way that might just make the experience better. I'm not suggesting that we should feel guilty about every decision that we've made. That is completely missing the point. What I'm saying is, let's approach these games with some spiritual awareness, where we can gain insight on ourselves depending on the choices that we make. Now, as we wrap up this journey through hidden landscapes of moral gaming, consider something powerful. Research shows that many gamers admit their gaming experiences shape their moral thinking. So next time you face a tough choice in a game, just know you could really be learning a lot about yourself. So now, in the comment section down below, leave me one moment in any game that invoked that feeling of remorse, that feeling of guilt, or anything. And with all that out the way, happy Lent to all my Christians. Make sure you guys subscribe to my podcast, and may God be with you all.